So there was a man who got fed up with the real world and decided to move his family to a deserted island. A few months after being there, an old friend came to visit the family on the island. As his friend came ashore, he noticed 3 small buildings that obviously the family had constructed in the short time they had been there. So the friend asked, "Tell me about these 3 buildings you've built. What's this first building over here?" The man replied, "Well, that's our home. That's where we live." Friend asked, "Great. And what about this second building?" Man replied, "Oh, well, that's the church we go to." Friend said, "Okay. And this third building?" Man said, "Oh, yeah, that's the church we don't go to." If we're honest, I think we all have that church we don't go to, don't we? Maybe it's our childhood church that we've grown out of and appreciate, but can no longer really tolerate. Maybe it's the church we left when we got married and realized we weren't as much a part of as we once thought. Perhaps it's the church that hurt us when we needed church the most. Of course, I'm not just talking about religion here. It's true of every aspect of our lives, if you think about it. Our political affiliation, the schools to which we send our children, that part of town in which we live and eat and shop. We seem to more quickly these days want people to know the tribes to which we belong and the ideas which we denounce. I suspect it's simply a symptom of the wider world. After all, we live in times that are perhaps more divisive than ever before. At least there are certainly statistics that seem to prove that such. In 2016, a Pew Research poll asked the question, would you be concerned if your son or your daughter married someone of the opposite political party? 50% of those surveyed answered yes, as opposed to only 4% who answered yes to that question in 1960. In fact, the percentage is even higher today than it was during the Civil War, when research shows that only 30% answered a similar question, yes, at that time. Of course, you don't need statistics to prove what we experience every day. A government shutdown for more than a month. Social media feeds filled with not just disagreement, but overt hate and vitriol. Even the church continues to be divided over money and social issues and, well, you name it. And quite frankly, there are times it seems we don't want it to be otherwise. Sometimes it even appears we're trying to make the divide even greater. Many of you likely watched this week the saga unfold over the video that went viral of a protest taking place in front of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. When a clip of the video first surfaced in the news, Nick Sandman, a student at Covington Catholic High School, was shown along with his fellow students seemingly taunting a Native American man wearing Make America Great Again hats. Later, a fuller version of the video was released that gave greater context for the exchange and showed a much more complex scene, which included several groups protesting, even inciting different responses for different reasons. On Wednesday morning, Savannah Guthrie of the Today Show interviewed Sandman about the event. Immediately, critics on the left lambasted the show for giving Sandman a platform to tell his side of the story. Critics on the right castigated Guthrie for asking the young man if he felt he did anything wrong or owed anyone an apology. After reading and watching several segments about the event, trying myself to fully understand what transpired, I just felt more confounded by the whole thing than anything else. I thought to myself, it's no wonder we're so divided today. Video clips that go viral without full context. Short sound bites that appear in our news feed pulled from a larger speech. The average tweet is 30 characters long, and half the time it's hard to tell whether they're meant to be taken seriously or humorously. And all of us sharing and resharing them as if by doing so we're proving some kind of point or might even change someone's mind. The truth is, the only thing we're really doing is reinforcing what's been a long life practice of humanity. While the degree to which we are divided today might come as a surprise, that we are divided is simply not something new. Difference has always been viewed more negatively than positively. Which of course has made many wonder, is it just in our DNA? In fact, another recent study aimed to explore how bias is actually cultivated. Is it more about nature or nurture? Sociologists performed several experiments with young children to find evidence one way or the other. One such experiment included newborns and children at 6 months of age. First, they showed newborns pictures of people both of different skin color and skin color like theirs. And in doing so, they found that newborns tended to gaze at the different pictures for equal periods of time. However, at only 6 months, when these same children were shown these same pictures again, the children gazed much longer at the pictures of those who looked like them than not. This was one experiment among several in the study that collectively resulted in overwhelming evidence that bias toward difference is most likely something learned rather than innate. Which then in my mind makes what we do that much more important, right? I mean, religious teachings have the power to combat such tendencies. But unfortunately, I worry in more cases than not, we're only perpetuating them. And not just by talking negatively about the church we don't go to. No, I mean in our fundamental theological foundations. In research for her well-known book, Paradise, Toni Morrison studied every major world religion and their teachings about the afterlife. While most world religions are based on the values of peace and love and justice, without exception, in every version of Paradise, she discovered 3 key components: community, eternity, and exclusion. It's no wonder we don't work very hard at unity. Even theology teaches us that in the end, we're all divided. Which I suspect is the reason I'm comforted by John's words this morning. I'd never really thought of Jesus praying for us. I don't know why. He's praying throughout the Gospels. But his prayer specifically in this passage for our unity is particularly heartening. After all, Lord knows we need it. And not just this prayer, but one another, especially our differences. In fact, it seems to be built into the very essence of creation. Now, I'm no scientist here, but one of you shared with me recently some new work that's been done on quantum physics, which references what some are calling the quantum mechanical view of reality. Now, bear with me here, okay? The theory actually dispels the notion that there are independent things, what we used to think of as basic building blocks for reality. And instead, in the quantum world, relationship has become the key determiner of everything. Subatomic particles come into form and are observed only as they are in relationship with something else. And if you think about your own experience, I suspect you know what I mean. You probably feel and act differently at home with your family than you do with your colleagues at work. Different settings and different people evoke some qualities from us while others leave us dormant. Haven't you ever been surprised by someone's actions, or perhaps even your own, when you, say, ran into an old flame unexpectedly? It turns out Descartes was wrong. It's not, I think, therefore I am. No, it's more like, I am, because we are. I have a colleague whose church recently was raising money for a mission trip they were planning to Africa. A gentleman going on the trip stood up during worship one Sunday to offer a moment for mission. He said this to the congregation: "You know, I didn't really want our church to support this endeavor, and I most certainly wasn't going to go on it. I think because I felt pity for the people, maybe even guilt that there wasn't much I was going to be able to do. But then I read something about the people we're going to visit. Do you know that every individual lives on $1 a day? That's amazing, $1 a day. When I read that, I thought to myself, these are not people I need to go help. These are people from whom I need to go and learn. I wonder if we saw one another as he was able to see them. Or as Jesus says, us and them and us, all of us and God. What if we stopped trying to change one another and started to believe we could actually learn from one another? What if we stopped seeing our differences as negatives and instead saw them as positives? What if we stopped acting as if we don't need diversity and rather started living as if it was our only means of survival? I mean, those organizations and companies who recognize this are some of the most successful in the world. Take Google, for instance. They intentionally put people who think differently and have conflicting ideas on a project because they found the best solutions come from opposing ideas that work together to find a better one. Now, I'm not going to lie. More times than not, I'm skeptical about this, especially in an age of technology. I mean, we're all tempted to live in a vacuum. Our social media feeds only fill up with those things we click on. Our search engines make recommendations to us on things we like because of clickbait and other personal information we share. And most of us are only getting our information from outlets that are biased toward our own views. There are days I don't think this is possible. And yet, Jesus does. Otherwise, he wouldn't be praying for it. That is what prayers, at least in part, aim to do, right? Affect change, especially in us. But the unity for which Jesus is praying is not necessarily in doctrine or belief, or even that we all have to think alike or act similarly. No, you see, we mistake too often unity for being uniform. All you have to do is look around and see that God created us uniquely. And remember, God said that's good. And so did Jesus, because he lived that way every day. I wonder, what if the church could somehow model this for the world? Could things change? What if we were able to disagree with one another and still care deeply for each other? Could Jesus, in fact, through the church, actually save the world? Several months ago, one of our members, Leslie Lady, gave an invitation to communion that I thought captured this best. In fact, she's going to preside at communion this morning here in just a few moments. But before she shares her words with you today, I want to share with you her words from that day. She said, Fran Michelle's, another member of our congregation, is a conservative, and I'm a liberal. It's those two languages that have come to divide us. If all I know about you is that you don't speak my language, you're probably not going to be on the top of my let's do lunch list. But about a year ago, Fran and I found a common language in knitting. Knit 1, purl 2. And after speaking in that language for a while, we discovered other languages we had in common. The language of marriage, the language of parenting, the language of aging, of worry, of humor. We discovered so many languages in common that I stopped calling her a conservative. Now I call her my friend. You know, the word communion comes from the Latin common, because Jesus invites conservative and liberal, black and white, male and female, gay and straight, American and alien, all of us to have lunch at his table. And if we're his guests, don't we have an obligation to reject the languages that divide us and search for common languages that unify us? I certainly do. And while that may not be the church everyone wants to go to, it's absolutely the church the world so desperately needs.